The rain had just stopped when Sanjay rolled his wheelchair through the narrow pavement leading to his favorite little café on the corner of the street. He had chosen this place deliberately, small, quiet, and hidden away from the flashing cameras and gossiping voices that always followed him. On this day of all days, he did not want the world to remember him as the billionaire businessman whose face lit up magazines. He only wanted to be a man who turned another year older, sitting in front of a warm cup of coffee and a cake with unlit candles. The glass door chimed softly as he entered, and a wave of warm air greeted him, carrying the scent of roasted beans and freshly baked croissants. The barista smiled politely. She knew who he was but had learned not to pry. Sanjay nodded, adjusted his navy blue suit jacket, and rolled toward the corner table near the window. From here he could see the whole café but remain unnoticed by passers-by outside. On the table was a small chocolate cake, decorated with fruit and 4 candles, bought by his assistant earlier, but left untouched. He glanced at it and smiled faintly. "Happy birthday, Sanjay," he thought bitterly. A man with billions in his accounts, global influence, and power beyond measure. And yet, no one to share this moment with. As he poured sugar into his coffee, he thought of the years that had passed since the accident, the night that changed everything. Once an athlete with boundless energy, he had become a man confined to a chair, watching life from a different height. People called him strong, inspiring, indestructible. But inside, he carried a weight that no money could ease: loneliness. The cafe buzzed lightly with conversations. Couples leaned toward each other, students tapped on laptops, friends laughed at shared jokes. Sanjay stared out the window where raindrops slid down like tears. He wondered if anyone even remembered his birthday. Not his board members. Not his so-called friends who only appeared when contracts were signed. Not even the family members who once fought for his attention, but now lived off his generosity. He cut a small piece of cake, tasted it without joy, and sighed. So this is what it means to be rich and alone. Just then, the cafe door opened again, and in came a woman and a little girl. They were wet from the rain, their hair clinging to their faces. The mother wore a red shirt and faded jeans, holding a worn handbag over her shoulder. The little girl, no older than 7, clutched her hand tightly. Her denim jacket was soaked, her shoes squeaking against the floor. The barista frowned and said something quietly about the cafe being full. The mother looked around desperately, her eyes landing on Sanjay's empty table with an extra chair. She hesitated, biting her lip, then bent down to whisper something to her daughter. The girl nodded and tugged at her mother's hand, pulling her towards Sanjay. Sanjay looked up from his coffee. Their eyes met. The woman's were soft, yet clouded with worry, while the girl's sparkled with innocent curiosity. "Excuse me, sir," the woman said politely, her voice trembling just slightly. "Would you mind if we sit here for a while?" "There are no other seats." Sanjay studied her for a moment. Most people recognized him instantly, but she seemed more concerned about her child than his identity. He gestured to the chair. "Of course, please." Relief washed over her face as she guided her daughter into the seat. She sat down carefully, offering him a small, grateful smile. The girl, Kinzarkhna, stared openly at Sanjay's wheelchair, then at the small cake in front of him. "Is that your birthday cake?" she asked suddenly, her voice pure and fearless. Sanjay chuckled softly. "Yes, it is." Her eyes widened. "Wow, did you make a wish?" He hesitated. He hadn't. What would he wish for? More wealth? More success? He already had those in abundance. The only thing he craved, genuine companionship, was something candles could not grant. "No," he admitted, shaking his head. "Not yet," Kinzarkhna gasped dramatically. "You can't eat birthday cake without making a wish first. That's the rule." Montasha, the mother, blushed. "Kinzar, don't bother the man." "It's all right," Sanjay said gently, his lips curving into the first real smile of the day. "She's right. I should make a wish." He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and allowed himself, for the first time in years, to hope. "I wish not to be alone anymore." When he opened his eyes, Kinzarkhna clapped. "Now you can eat!" Montasha laughed softly, and Sanjay caught the sound like a melody he hadn't heard in years. It was unpolished, tired, but genuine. He noticed the faint lines of struggle on her face, the kind that came from sleepless nights and endless worries. Yet her eyes carried resilience, and her smile held warmth. "You seem like you've had a long day," Sanjay said quietly. She nodded. "We've had a long few years, actually. Today was especially hard. We were caught in the rain, and I promised Kinzar a warm drink. I didn't realize how crowded it would be." Sanjay looked at the girl, who was now happily swinging her legs under the chair, humming to herself. "She has a lot of energy. She's my strength," Montasha replied, her voice firm despite the weariness. "Everything I do for her." Something in those words pierced Sanjay. He knew what it meant to carry the weight of responsibility, but hers was different, raw, maternal, selfless. The barista arrived, setting down a small cup of hot chocolate and a pastry for the girl. Montasha looked surprised. "We didn't order this," Sanjay smiled faintly. "It's my treat. Consider it a birthday gift for your daughter." Kinzarkhna's eyes lit up. "Thank you, uncle," she said cheerfully before digging into the pastry. Montasha looked at him, gratitude mingling with hesitation. "You really didn't have to." "Birthdays are meant to be shared," Sanjay replied. For the first time in years, as he watched the little girl sip her hot chocolate and laugh with crumbs on her cheeks, Sanjay felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was connection. The rain outside began again, tapping gently against the glass. Inside the cafe, warmth spread across the table, not from the coffee or the candles, but from the simple presence of a mother and her child. Sanjay realized then that maybe his wish wasn't impossible after all. The cafe lights reflected softly against the rain-washed windows, blurring the city's chaos outside into watercolor strokes. Inside, at that little corner table, something unusual had begun. For years, Sanjay had guarded his private space like a fortress. He had trained himself to sit through dinners alone, keep conversations short, and close his world to anyone who wasn't part of business or responsibility. But now, as he watched Montasha carefully unwrap a napkin for her daughter, and as Kinzarkhna sipped her hot chocolate with exaggerated delight, Sanjay felt the walls inside him loosen. He cut another slice of cake, pushed it gently across the table. "Would you both like some?" Montasha blinked, caught off guard. No, it's your birthday cake. We shouldn't," but Kinzar's eyes widened like stars. "Cake? Mama, please?" Sanjay laughed, a warm and deep sound that startled even him. "It would make me happy if you share it." After all, birthdays are not meant to be eaten alone. Montasha hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "All right, just a small piece for her then." Kinzar clapped her hands in triumph as Sanjay cut a slice and placed it on a small plate. The little girl devoured it with pure joy, leaving smudges of chocolate on her lips. Sanjay's eyes softened. In her innocence, she reminded him of the childhood he had lost too soon. The days before expectations, before business empires, before loneliness. "You're very kind," Montasha said, her voice quieter now. She tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear, the red of her shirt glowing warmly in the cafe lights. "Not many people offer kindness to strangers these days." Sanjay shook his head. "I don't think it's kindness. I think it's necessary. Life feels less heavy when shared, even in small moments." Her eyes lingered on him, as though trying to read the weight behind his words. There was something in his face, dignified yet wounded, accomplished yet weary. She had seen men with pride, men with arrogance, but rarely one who carried so much silence. "You come here often?" she asked carefully. He chuckled. "Not really. Most days I'm surrounded by too many people. Today I wanted to be away from all of that." "You chose to be alone on your birthday?" The question hit him harder than expected. He shifted slightly in his chair, gazing at the candle wax dripping slowly down the side of the cake. "Sometimes being alone feels easier than pretending." Montasha didn't press. She simply nodded, and he respected her for that. People usually clawed into his life, demanded explanations, or sought details they could turn into gossip. But she sat there, sipping her tea, respecting his silence. It made him curious. "Who was she? Do you live nearby?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, her tone cautious but not closed. "A few blocks away. It's Not much, but it's home. She looked at her daughter, who had now started to hum softly while drawing shapes on the fogged window with her finger. I try to make it enough for her. And her father? The words slipped before he could stop himself. He immediately regretted the intrusion, but Montasha surprised him with her honesty. He left when Kinzar was 3. Too many responsibilities, he said. Too much pressure. We haven't heard from him since. She shrugged, though her voice cracked slightly. So it's just been the two of us. I work wherever I can, cafes, shops, sometimes cleaning houses. Anything to keep the lights on. Sanjay felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He had spent his life surrounded by excess, mansions, private jets, diamond watches, and here was a woman who fought daily just to keep the lights on, and yet carried herself with grace. Her daughter fed and happy. You're strong, he murmured. Montasha smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed fatigue. I don't know about strong. I just keep going. For her. For a long while, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that carried meaning, where two souls acknowledged each other's scars without needing to speak them aloud. Finally, Kinzar broke it, turning toward Sanjay with her innocent curiosity. Uncle, why are you in a chair with wheels? Montasha's eyes widened in embarrassment. Kinzar, don't, but Sanjay raised a hand gently. It's all right. He looked at the little girl, his voice steady but soft. I had an accident a few years ago. Since then I can't walk, so this chair helps me move around. Kinzar tilted her head thoughtfully, then smiled. That's cool. It's like your own little car. Do you drive it fast? Sanjay chuckled, truly amused. Sometimes faster than people expect. Her laughter filled the cafe, bright and unrestrained, and for a moment Sanjay forgot the bitterness of his birthday. When she returned to sipping her chocolate, Montasha leaned closer, her voice lowered. I'm sorry. She asked questions without thinking. Don't apologize, Sanjay replied. She sees the world as it is. Children don't judge, they just notice. It's refreshing. Montasha studied him then, truly studied him. His suit was expensive. His watch gleamed subtly under the lights, and yet he carried himself without arrogance. There was something about him that didn't fit neatly into the category of ordinary man. She wanted to ask more, but she also knew it wasn't her place. Instead, she said softly, thank you for letting us sit here. For the cake, for not making us feel out of place. Sanjay looked at her, meeting her eyes fully for the first time. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Her lips parted as if to respond, but at that moment, the cafe door swung open again, letting in a gust of wind and a pair of sharply dressed men. They scanned the room quickly, spotted Sanjay, and hurried toward the table. Mr. Sanjay, we've been looking for you, one of them said urgently. Montasha blinked in surprise. Mr. Sanjay? Her mind turned quickly. Was this just any man, or someone important? Sanjay's jaw tightened. I told you I didn't want company tonight. But sir, leave, he commanded. His voice low but carrying authority that could silence boardrooms. The men exchanged glances, hesitated, then backed away and left the cafe. Montasha stared at him. Realization dawning. His presence, his composure, the way others addressed him. It all made sense now. He wasn't just a man celebrating alone. He was someone powerful. But before she could piece it together fully, Kinzar tugged at his sleeve. Uncle, can I light the candles for you, please? Mama says birthdays are for wishing happiness. Sanjay's sternness melted instantly. He nodded. Of course. The little girl struck a match, carefully lighting each candle while her mother watched nervously. When they all flickered to life, Sanjay closed his eyes once more. This time his wish was clearer, stronger. Let this moment last. Let this feeling stay. As the candles glowed between them, 3 souls from different worlds shared the same table, unaware that this night would change all of their lives forever. The candles flickered softly, reflecting in Sanjay's eyes like tiny golden stars. For years, he had blown out birthday candles in boardrooms, luxury yachts, and private villas, but never with the feeling that someone truly wished him happiness. Tonight was different. Tonight, across his table sat a single mother with untamed strength and a little girl whose laughter could melt walls, stronger than steel. Make a wish, Uncle. Kinzarkhna reminded him, her small hands clasped in excitement. He chuckled, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he wished not for success, not for another empire to build, but for belonging. He blew gently, and the candles died with a thin trail of smoke rising into the warm café air. Kinzar clapped, and Montasha smiled, hesitant but genuine. Something in her expression told him she hadn't smiled like this in a very long time. "Now it's official," Sanjay said, looking at the girl. "Thank you for making this birthday real." "You're welcome," Kinzar replied proudly, then leaned in close to whisper loudly, "Mama always says birthdays should never be lonely." Montasha blushed, shooting her daughter a warning look. Kinzar, but Sanjay's heart caught at those words. Birthdays should never be lonely. He'd spent too many that way. Tonight was proof of how much difference just two strangers could make. The barista, who had been quietly observing the unusual gathering at the corner, brought another set of forks and plates. Sanjay served them both slices of cake, insisting despite Montasha's protests. Soon, the three of them were eating together, the rain outside fading into background music. For a while, conversation flowed easily. Kinzar told stories of her school, how she wanted to be an artist one day, how she drew on scraps of old newspapers when notebooks were too expensive. Her hands moved animatedly as she spoke, her innocence filling the room like sunlight. Sanjay listened with genuine interest, laughing softly at her dramatic impressions of teachers. "You have talent," he told her sincerely. "Don't ever stop drawing. The world needs more art." Her eyes lit up at his encouragement. "Really? You think so?" "I know so." Montasha watched silently, her chest tightening with something she couldn't explain. No stranger had ever spoken to her daughter with such respect, as though her dreams were as important as any CEO's ambition. She studied Sanjay's face, the gentle way he smiled at the child, the way his tone softened around her, and for the first time that night, she wondered who this man really was. Finally, curiosity got the better of her. "Forgive me if I'm prying," she said softly, "but those men who came earlier—" "They called you Mr. Sanjay, are you—" He sighed, leaning back slightly. "Yes, I suppose you could say I'm someone the business world knows." Her eyes widened as pieces fell into place, the tailored suit, the quiet authority, the way others obeyed him. "You mean, you're that Sanjay?" "The Sanjay who owns," he raised a hand gently. "Please. Tonight I don't want to be that Sanjay. Tonight I just want to be a man who shared his birthday with a mother and her daughter." Montasha swallowed her questions, though her heart raced. She had heard his name before. Who hadn't? News channels spoke of his business empire, magazines speculated on his fortune. But here he was, offering her child cake and speaking like an ordinary man who craved something money couldn't buy. "All right," she said quietly. "Then tonight you're just Sanjay." His lips curved into a grateful smile. "Thank you." The cafe grew quieter as the evening deepened. A few customers left, leaving empty chairs behind. Yet the three of them lingered, as though time had slowed just for them. At one point, Kinzar leaned her head sleepily against her mother's arm. Sanjay noticed the faint shadows under Montasha's eyes, the way her shoulders carried exhaustion. He wondered how many nights she had gone without rest, how many battles she had fought unseen. "Montasha," he said softly, testing her name on his lips for the first time. "You work very hard, don't you?" She nodded. "I have to. It's just me and her. I can't afford to stop. You shouldn't have to carry it all alone." Her gaze hardened slightly, defensive. "With respect, Sanjay, I don't have a choice. When people leave, when promises break, you learn to depend only on yourself." He held her gaze, not flinching. "I understand more than you think. Money doesn't keep people from leaving. Trust me, I know." For a moment, silence stretched. Then something in her expression softened, as though recognizing the loneliness hidden behind his wealth. Kinzar stirred, yawning. "Mama, can we stay here a little longer?" "It's so warm." Montasha stroked her daughter's hair. "Just a little, love." "Then we'll go home." Sanjay hesitated, then spoke carefully. "If you'd like, I could drop you home. It's late, and the rain hasn't stopped. I wouldn't want you both walking in this weather." Montasha stiffened. "We'll manage." I don't doubt that you can, he replied gently, but sometimes it's all right to accept help. Her defenses faltered at the kindness in his tone. She glanced at her daughter, who was already half asleep against her. Finally, she exhaled. All right, thank you. Later, when the cafe finally closed, Sanjay asked his driver to bring the car around. Montasha tried to protest, saying a taxi would do, but the rain had grown harsher, and she relented. As the sleek black car pulled up, her eyes widened. She had suspected he was wealthy, but this confirmed it beyond doubt. She tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, unsure if she belonged in such luxury. Sanjay noticed her hesitation. It's just a car, he said softly. You belong in it as much as anyone. Reluctantly, she stepped inside, settling her daughter beside her. The warmth of the leather seats wrapped around them. Kinzar, too tired to question, quickly leaned into her mother's lap and drifted to sleep. As the car glided through the rain-soaked streets, silence lingered. Finally, Montasha whispered, Why us, Sanjay? Why did you let us sit with you tonight? He looked out at the blurred lights passing by, then turned to her. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what it feels like to be seen, to be human, not just a name or a fortune. Her breath caught at the honesty in his voice. For a moment, she saw not the billionaire the world admired or envied, but a man stripped of titles, longing for connection. The car stopped outside a modest apartment building. Montasha carefully lifted her sleeping daughter, whispering, Thank you for everything. We won't forget this night. Sanjay watched her carry the girl, the red of her shirt vivid against the gray rain. Something inside him resisted letting the moment end. Montasha, he called, before she reached the steps. She turned, waiting. He hesitated, then simply said, Happy birthday. To me, her lips curved in a small, tender smile. Happy birthday, Sanjay. And then she disappeared into the building, leaving him staring after her, his heart heavier and lighter all at once. That night, as Sanjay returned home to his empty mansion, the echo of their laughter lingered in his mind. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. But he also didn't know that this brief encounter was just the beginning of something that would change all their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of Sanjay's penthouse. He sat in his study, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him, while reports and contracts lay scattered across his desk. Normally, his mornings began with endless meetings and sharp decisions. But today, his mind was elsewhere, lingering on the sound of Kinzarkhna's laughter and the quiet resilience in Montasha's eyes. He had spent decades surrounded by people who pretended to care, only to chase his fortune. Last night was the first time in years that someone had sat with him without expecting anything. The warmth of that tiny café had followed him home, refusing to leave. His assistant entered briskly. Sir, the board has arranged a dinner tonight with potential investors from Europe. Should I confirm your presence? Sanjay looked up, his voice unusually firm. Cancel it, the assistant blinked. Cancel, sir? Yes. Tell them I'm occupied. But sir, this deal... Cancel it. The tone left no room for argument. The assistant bowed slightly and left, though confusion lingered on his face. Sanjay leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline. What am I doing? He wondered. For years, business had dictated his every choice. But today, his heart tugged him somewhere else, toward the small apartment where a single mother and her daughter had reminded him of his humanity. Meanwhile, in that modest apartment, Montasha was already awake, preparing breakfast. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake her daughter, who still slept curled up in a blanket. The apartment was small, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, walls that carried the wear of years, but it was their haven. As she sliced bread, her mind replayed the night before. The way Sanjay had treated her daughter with dignity, the gentle kindness in his voice, the contrast between his wealth and his humility, it had unsettled her. Men like him didn't notice women like her, and yet he had. Mama. A sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. Kinzar shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Good morning, love, Montasha said, forcing a smile. Sit. Breakfast is ready. The little girl climbed onto the chair. Mama, do you think we'll ever see Uncle Sanjay again? Montasha paused, her hands tightening around the knife. Why do you ask? Because he was nice, nicer than anyone. He listened to me and... She hesitated, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. When he smiled, he looked lonely. Montasha's chest ached at her daughter's words. Children noticed what adults ignored. She brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. Sometimes people pass through our lives only for a little while, but we must be grateful for the good they bring. Kinza pouted, but nodded, obedient as always. That afternoon, fate decided otherwise. Montasha had to pick up extra work at a local shop. With her daughter in school until evening, she hurried to the cafe afterward to grab a cheap cup of tea and rest her feet before heading home. She didn't expect to see him there, but there he was, Sanjay, in the same corner seat, his wheelchair parked by the window, a newspaper folded on the table. When his eyes lifted and found hers, something unspoken passed between them. You came back, she said, more surprised than she meant to sound. I was hoping you would too, he admitted. Her heart skipped at the honesty of his words. She joined him hesitantly, clutching her bag close. Why? Men like you don't wait for women like me. Men like me, he replied calmly, don't often meet women like you. She looked away, uncomfortable under his gaze. I'm just a single mother trying to survive. There's nothing remarkable about me. You're wrong, he said softly. Strength is remarkable. Sacrifice is remarkable. And the way you've raised your daughter, that is more valuable than all the wealth I have. Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The barista arrived, and Sanjay ordered tea for her without asking, as though he already knew what she wanted. They talked for hours, about life, about choices, about the invisible weight of responsibility. She told him about working 3 jobs, about the nights she went hungry so her daughter could eat. He told her about the loneliness of wealth, the betrayal of friends who only wanted his fortune, the accident that had chained him to a wheelchair. At one point, Montasha whispered, "Doesn't it hurt?" "To lose so much?" Sanjay's eyes darkened. "It hurts more to have everything, and still feel empty." The simplicity of his answer pierced her. For the first time, she saw beyond the billionaire's suit. She saw the man. When evening came, Montasha realized she had lost track of time. She stood abruptly. "I have to get Kinzar from school. I'll come with you," Sanjay offered. Her first instinct was to refuse, but something in his eyes, sincere, almost pleading, made her nod. The school bell had just rung when they arrived. Children rushed out, their laughter filling the air. Then came Kinzar, spotting her mother instantly. But when her eyes fell on Sanjay, her whole face lit up. "Uncle Sanjay!" she cried, running to him. Without hesitation, she hugged his arm tightly. "You came back!" His heart melted. "Of course I did." Montasha watched, torn between fear and gratitude. Fear, because this man belonged to a world far above theirs. Gratitude, because he treated her daughter as though she were his own. As they walked back together, Kinzar chattered happily, holding both their hands, one small hand in Montasha's, the other resting on Sanjay's. To passers-by, they looked like a family. The thought terrified Montasha. "This isn't real!" It can't be. But when she glanced at Sanjay and saw the softness in his expression, a dangerous question bloomed in her heart. What if it could? That night, after dropping them home again, Sanjay sat in his car, staring at the dimly lit building long after they had gone inside. He felt something stirring deep within him, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was hope. For the first time since his accident, since the endless nights of silence, he felt the possibility of a future where his life wasn't just numbers and power, but laughter and warmth. But he also knew that the path ahead wouldn't be simple. For a man like him and a woman like her, the world would not be kind. Still, as he leaned back and whispered her name, Montasha, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed unfolded in a rhythm neither of them had expected. What began as chance meetings at the café soon turned into something else. Long conversations, shared silences, and small gestures that spoke louder than words. Sanjay found himself waiting for Montasha's presence, the way a thirsty man waits for rain. She, in turn, discovered that the man everyone called the ruthless billionaire was nothing like the monster painted by rumors. Yet, with every step they took closer, reality loomed like a shadow. One evening, Sanjay invited Montasha and Kinzarkhna to his penthouse. She hesitated at first, aware of the gulf between their worlds. But her daughter's excitement pushed her to accept. When they arrived, the doorman looked at them with raised brows. Unused to seeing a woman in simple clothes and a child with patched-up shoes step out of Sanjay's car. But Sanjay himself wheeled forward to greet them, his smile warm and disarming. "Welcome," he said. "This place has been too quiet for too long." Inside, the penthouse was breathtaking. High ceilings, sparkling chandeliers, polished marble floors. Walls adorned with rare art. Kinzar gasped audibly. "Mama, it looks like a palace!" she whispered. Montasha held her hand tighter. She felt out of place, like an intruder in a world that didn't belong to her. But Sanjay noticed her unease and leaned closer. "Don't look at the walls," he said softly. "Look at me. Tonight you're not guests. You're home." Something in his tone melted her defenses. Dinner was lavish, far beyond what Montasha had ever seen. Platters of food, delicate desserts, crystal glasses filled with sparkling juice. Kinzar's eyes sparkled as she tried dishes she had never even heard of before. Sanjay, however, wasn't watching the food. He was watching them. The way Montasha cut food into small pieces for her daughter before taking a bite herself. The way Kinzar kept asking questions, and Montasha patiently answered each one. The way laughter filled the space that had been silent for years. At one point, Montasha looked up to find him staring. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked quietly. "Because," he replied, his voice low, "you make this place feel alive." Her breath caught, but before she could reply, Kinzar interrupted with innocent cheer. "Uncle Sanjay, can I have dessert every day if I come here?" He chuckled. "If your mama allows, then yes. Every day." Montasha shot him a playful glare. "Don't spoil her." "Some things," Sanjay said, glancing at Kinzar, "deserve to be spoiled." The little girl beamed, completely unaware of the undercurrent between the two adults. But happiness, as always, attracted attention. The very next day, whispers began spreading among Sanjay's circle. His assistant had seen him with Montasha, and soon the gossip reached the ears of his business rivals and so-called friends. At an exclusive gathering one night, a wealthy socialite leaned across the table with a smirk. "Sanjay, we hear you've been entertaining. Unusual company lately. A single mother, is it?" The laughter that followed was cruel, mocking. Another man added, "Surely you're not serious. What will people say if you're seen with someone like her?" Sanjay's jaw tightened. "People will say what they always say, whatever feeds their boredom." "I don't care. But you should," the woman pressed. "Your image, your influence. Do you want to risk all that for a—" "Nobody!" The word stung him, not for himself, but for Montasha. He leaned forward, his eyes cold steel. "She has more dignity than half the people in this room. If that makes her a nobody, then I'd rather stand with her than with all of you." The room fell silent. For the first time, Sanjay realized just how far he was willing to go. Meanwhile, Montasha remained unaware of the storm brewing in his world. She was too busy fighting her own fears. Though her heart longed for the kindness she saw in Sanjay, her mind reminded her of reality. He belonged to a world where image was everything. She was just a struggling mother barely managing rent. One night, as she tucked Kinzar into bed, her daughter whispered, "Mama, do you think Uncle Sanjay could be my papa?" Montasha froze, her heart clenching painfully. "Sweetheart, don't say things like that." "Why not?" Kinzar asked innocently. "He cares for us. He listens." "Isn't that what papas do?" Montasha kissed her daughter's forehead, blinking back tears. "Some dreams are too big, love. And sometimes they hurt when they don't come true." But deep down, she knew the child's words had struck something in her she couldn't ignore. A week later, Sanjay surprised them with an outing. Instead of the café, he brought them to a quiet park on the city's edge. Children played, couples strolled, and laughter echoed. For once, Sanjay's wheelchair didn't make him feel like an outsider, because Montasha and Kinzar were beside him. They sat on a bench, watching the sunset. Kinzar ran ahead to play with other children, leaving the two adults alone. "Montasha," Sanjay began, his voice unsteady. "Do you ever wish life had been different?" She gave a bitter smile. "Every day. But wishing doesn't change anything. What if it could?" he asked softly. She turned to him, eyes searching. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he paused, struggling for words, "I don't want this us to be temporary. You've given me something I thought I lost forever. I don't want to let it go." Her breath caught. "Sanjay, please, don't say things like that. We live in different worlds. People will laugh. They'll never accept. Let them laugh," he cut in firmly. "I've spent years living for others. For once I want to live for myself. And what I want is you." Her heart pounded in her chest. For a moment, she saw the sincerity in his eyes, the raw vulnerability of a man who had everything yet longed for something money couldn't buy. But fear gripped her. She stood abruptly, tears threatening. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Sanjay. I can't let Kinzar hope for something that may never happen." With that, she walked away, leaving him staring after her, his chest heavy with both love and helplessness. That night, as he sat alone in his penthouse, Sanjay realized the truth. He wasn't just fighting for love. He was fighting against the world, against expectations, against her fears. But one thing was certain. He wasn't giving up. Not on her. Not on the little girl who called him uncle. Not on the fragile dream that had begun to bloom in the quiet corners of his heart. The rift between them weighed heavy. After the park, Montasha stopped coming by the café. Days passed into weeks, and Sanjay felt the silence like chains around his chest. He tried to focus on his empire, meetings, contracts, boardrooms, but every deal felt hollow. His birthday had been the loneliest night of his life, but at least then he'd found them. Now losing them felt unbearable. One evening he wheeled into the same café where it had all begun. The waiter, noticing his downcast face, whispered, "She hasn't been here either. Maybe she's avoiding this place." Sanjay stared at the empty chair across from him. She's protecting her heart and her daughters. But what about his own heart? Meanwhile, Montasha struggled in silence. She kept working late shifts, kept smiling at her daughter, but every time Kinzar asked about Sanjay, her throat tightened. "Uncle Sanjay must be busy," she'd say. But Kinzar wasn't a fool. One rainy evening, the little girl surprised her mother by stuffing a drawing into her bag. "What's this?" Montasha asked. "It's for Uncle Sanjay," Kinzar said. "It's our family, me, you, and him. If you won't take it, I will." Montasha hugged her tightly, tears spilling. "Sweetheart, it's not that easy." But the child's innocent hope chipped away at the walls around her heart. Fate intervened on a night none of them expected. A sudden storm flooded parts of the city. Montasha's neighborhood, already fragile, was hit the worst. The small apartment complex where she lived began to take on water, and electricity failed. With Kinzar clinging to her, Montasha waded through knee-deep water, panicked and unsure where to go. In desperation, she called the only number she could think of. Sanjay. Her voice shook through the line. I'm sorry to bother you. We need help." He didn't hesitate. "Send me your location." "I'm coming." Minutes later, his car pulled up, headlights cutting through the storm. His driver helped them in, soaking wet, shivering. Sanjay's eyes locked on Montasha's, relief and determination blazing. "You'll never face this world alone again," he said fiercely. Back at his penthouse, he ordered dry clothes, warm food, and blankets. Kinzar curled into the sofa, safe and asleep within minutes. Montasha, however, stood by the window, staring at the storm. "Why did you come?" she whispered. "You didn't have to." Sanjay wheeled closer, his gaze steady. "Because you matter to me. Both of you. I can't pretend otherwise anymore." Her tears fell freely. "Sanjay, I'm scared. I've lived my life being judged, overlooked, rejected. And people look up to you. They tear you down if you slip. I can't drag you into my struggles." He reached for her hand. "Montasha, listen to me. I've built empires, survived betrayals, faced loneliness darker than any storm. But nothing has ever mattered as much as what I feel for you. You don't drag me down, you give me a reason to rise." Her lips trembled. And Kinzar? He smiled softly. She's already my daughter in my heart. Days later, news spread that Sanjay had been seen with Montasha and her daughter in public, walking into a charity gala together. The gossip was vicious at first. Whispers of gold digger, unfit, scandal echoed across headlines. But Sanjay didn't flinch. Standing before cameras, he introduced them proudly. "This is Montasha," he declared, "the woman who taught me that life is more than wealth. And this is Kinzarkhna, the little girl who reminded me how to dream again." "They are my family," reporters gasped. Some scoffed, but others, moved by the sincerity in his voice, began to applaud. That night, Montasha looked at him with awe. "You risked everything." He squeezed her hand. "No, I finally chose what matters." Months passed and life took on a new rhythm. The cafe remained their special place, but so did parks, libraries, and family dinners at home. Kinzar filled Sanjay's quiet halls with laughter, and Montasha's presence softened the edges of his solitude. On the anniversary of that fateful birthday, Sanjay invited them both to the cafe again. This time, the cake wasn't solitary. It bore 3 names written in frosting: Sanjay, Montasha, Kinzarkhna. When the candles were lit, Kinzar clapped her hands. "Now we're really a family." Sanjay turned to Montasha, his eyes shining. "Not just a family. A promise. Will you marry me?" The cafe went silent. Montasha's hand flew to her mouth, tears glistening. She glanced at her daughter, whose face was glowing with hope. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. 1,000 times yes. Applause filled the room as Sanjay slipped a ring onto her finger. Kinzar threw her arms around them both, squealing with joy, and for the first time in years, Sanjay felt whole. The storm had passed. The lonely billionaire who once sat alone at a cafe table had found not just love, but a family. A single mother who once feared judgment had found a partner who saw her worth. And a little girl who once wished for a father had found one who chose her, not by blood, but by heart. It wasn't wealth that made the story extraordinary. It was love, fragile yet fierce, tested by the world yet victorious. Because sometimes, the greatest riches are found not in gold or empire, but in the courage to sit across a table and whisper, "Stay." The end.